Now, we have a panel discussion that is going to tackle the issue of youth population that's leveraging the youth dividend through Africa's economic development through TVET. And it's a very interesting discussion this afternoon. Better be ready, because at some point I'm going to receive questions from the audience, and let's make this a conversation that is going to actually yield results in terms of policy, driving policy, and also all that we want to see progress in this sector of ours. Now, to help me take on this discussion, I have the pleasure to invite our panelists this afternoon. Let me invite Mr. Lawrence Ngutai, who is the CEO and Council Secretary of the TVET Curriculum Development Assessment and Certificate Council of Kenya. Let's receive Mr. Lawrence. Thank you so much. Dr. Lawrence. Let's also welcome Mr. Modesto Gomani, who is the Director of Training Programs, Technical, Entrepreneurial, and Vocational Education and Training, TVET, all the way from Malawi. You're most welcome, Mr. Modesto. And then the last but not the least, of course, Ms. Kameta Sainzoga Pichet, who is the Director General of the National Industrial Research and Development Agency here in Rwanda. Let's welcome her. The only lady on the panel this afternoon. Well, I did not introduce myself for those who came in late. My name is Ethan Tashevia once again, and I'm the moderator. Now, before we left for our lunch, someone asked me to make this announcement. If you think by mistake, you carried this receiver, kindly make sure you leave it behind when you're going back to your hotel. Thank you. Now, let's begin this way. Thank you so much for joining us again. One of the issues that we know, the good issues actually, the good problem is that Africa has the biggest youth population compared to other continents. But when it comes to unemployment, there is these numbers that were released by the African Union that youth unemployment in Africa could exceed 30% this year going forward. And now the question, the first one that goes to you, Kameta, and probably to all of you, is unemployment an self-inflicted problem for Africa, knowing that we've probably had this opportunity of training, giving our children the right skills through TVET. If we had done it before, do you think it could have solved this issue of unemployment?
Thank you very much. I think definitely the first cause of unemployment is skills and knowledge. How is your knowledge? How is it applicable in the economy? So what's the value of the knowledge that you have? In many African countries, you find primary enrollment rates are high, but the quality of education means that the knowledge is not relevant for the market. So the quality of the knowledge and the relevance to the market is a prerequisite. But often we focus on the skills and the knowledge, and we forget the two other determinants that fight unemployment, which is basically the ecosystem, which is one big one. By ecosystem, I think if we had had this conversation 15 years ago, people would have thought about macroeconomic condition. Luckily, as African countries, we have overcome that issue. Most countries now have stable macroeconomic conditions. But the rest of the ecosystem, access to finance, access to markets, being able to have the right networks, being able to understand the market, being able to be competitive on the market, are things that we don't often talk about along with the conversation around knowledge. And I think it's extremely important, because if we only talk about skills and knowledge, and we don't talk about access to market, we don't talk about access to finance, then we are just preparing our youth for being very highly educated, unemployed people. So the conversation needs to have both. What are the conditions to enter the private sector? What are the conditions to be an entrepreneur? How do we support startups? We say we like innovations, but how do we actually support innovations? Our public service actually open to innovation? So the ecosystem for me is a very big one. The last point, which is part of the ecosystem that I touched about, that I pointed out a little bit, but I think we do not talk about enough, is the type of access to finance. So often in Africa, we have this dream that if you've gone to school, a good school, a TVET school or another regular school, and you have a bright idea, then you should go to a bank and get money. But in the real world, it doesn't work like that. In other countries, you don't go to a bank for a startup to start your business. You actually have very dedicated financing structures that are focused on angel investors, that are focused on startup equity, that support these investors not only with cash, but also how do you make sure that you survive the valley of death. And very often this, what we call in French accompagnement, this support that is a full support to entrepreneurship that should start from the TVET school all the way to when you become a taxpayer is missing. So to answer your question, yes, we have a demographic dividend, but if we're not careful, if we don't address these three things, it will very quickly become a demographic curse.
Interesting. That's an industrial perspective. But from you who are actually training these young people, do you believe what she told us? How do we make sure that we transform the manpower, the skills we have to create the opportunities for Africa's transformation?
Thank you very much, the moderator. I think at this point in time, it's good that Africa has realized that we need to do something for our population. As I observe, you would agree with me that Africa is having an advantage because other continents are aging in terms of population, but the population of Africa is still young, in which case we still have the energy to capitalize on the human resource that we have to have an edge on the global economy. So as such, if you check, you will see that Africa crops out about 10 million people in a year, youth, out of the basic education. And these youth are going into the labor market without any skill. And Africa, we don't see it as a ticking bomb in ourselves, because if we don't do something for this youth, then we are creating problems for Africa. That's why TVET is finding space there. We need to skill these people. We need to develop policies that are able to articulate and capitalize on this human resource that we have as an Africa. We need to create TVET that is able to create people that are employable. We need to create TVET that promotes innovation and also creativity. We need also to create TVET that is inclusive, taking on board both the youth as well as the others who in one way or the other at an opportune time they missed an opportunity to get a skill. So we need to skill the whole population of Africa, considering that Africa is still young. I'm looking at the policies that we have as of now being mostly driven by what we feel would befit the current situation. But Africa needs to think of the future of the global economy. We need to create Africa that acts like an estate for skilled personnel. That's the only way that we can tap from the world resources, by making sure that we export human resource that at the end of the day will repatriate the finances to Africa and help Africa to grow. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Great points. But how do we create that kind of TVET that is effective in terms of what Mr. Goman, yes. How do you create that that is,
thanks,
inclusive?
Thanks, Ethan, for that question. What I may say is that when you're talking of the the youth demographic dividend, it revolves around 4 main items, that is health and well-being. 2, we are talking of education and skills development. Then we also talk about good economic policies, whereby you are talking of employment, as we talked about, as well as entrepreneurship. And the other one is on governance, where we allow even the youth to participate, even in terms of establishing or developing good electoral laws. But at the same time, when you are saying that TVET has been going through in Africa, whereas the industry required them to help them in the labor force, but there has been found to be mismatch. The most cause, or the probable cause, has been the graduates that we churn out, or those who are graduating from our TVET institutions not meeting the expectations of the employers. This may be been brought about by issues of curricula, whereby now we are expecting to reform curricula to the industry standard, whereby we are supposed to train against the occupational standards. And let the TVET institutions, since we are all here, we are stakeholders in TVET sector, let us train against the statement of performance given by the industry people. Next is on the issue of assessment. Sir, those graduates, you may find that they have certificates, but they are not getting employed. Many companies are just even establishing training institutions within the company, because what we are releasing out cannot serve them. One thing, let us not give certificates for the purpose of giving certificate or because somebody has passed an exam, but somebody must exhibit the competence. If I give an example, in my country, Kenya, if you are to join secondary school, there are what you call national schools, county schools, sub-county schools. The students compete against each other. Same case, if you want to enroll into a good program in the university, you compete against each other. But then, look, you are now developing a worker, training a worker, an electrical installer, a technician, a plumber. Should you present an exam to plumbers to compete against each other? No. It shouldn't be against a given criteria, statement of performance, what I may call criterion reference. Therefore, let us move away from doing the assessment and issuing certificates for the purpose of just issuing, or because somebody is competing with each other, but as per the expectations of the industry. Thank you.
And what are those expectations? And, I'm asking this in sense of how do we create the right skills, but also make sure that these people have the right entrepreneurial, not just technical skills, but also entrepreneurial skills to start their own businesses and probably succeed in the industry. Can I start with you going back, or do you want to?
Yes, it's good that I can start. Then, in our country, what you have done, and you have, yes, we have said, and we do believe that entrepreneurship is critical. The people who are out there or who are graduating must have certain skills, what we call soft skills, in addition to the technical skills. So what we have done, we have incorporated 6 basic competencies to be among the other core competencies. And this includes demonstration of communication skills, digital literacy, numeracy skills, and environmental literacy, which is very key, and it has been a problem here. Then we have the entrepreneurship skills, entrepreneurial skills, as well as the employability skills. Therefore, in all the training, those ones, they are incorporated, and every graduate must be trained on issues of entrepreneurship. But since many other people, the speakers talked about this, about the innovation centers, incubation aspect in TVET sector, those has been instituted. But then might leave the other participant to contribute on the same side.
Richard, how do we create this room for not just technical schools, but also entrepreneurial schools to make sure that these graduates succeed on the market?
So if we look at the report of WEF on the future of work, what is very clear is that the kind of skills that will be needed in the future, we have the traditional hard skills, but we have other skills, including skills that are related to entrepreneurship, such as problem solving, creative thinking, teamwork, which we tend to say, these are they're like things that you do when you have time. But now what is clear is, as we look at the fourth industrial revolution, these become the core skills, because you can find quite a bit of information around engineering online. Now, to what extent are we using our TVET and our knowledge centers to actually help our economies leapfrog is, I think, a key question. And you talked about expectations of the industry, but if we look at it the other way around, as governments, let me now put myself in the shoes of government. What do we aspire to for our economies? In the morning, I think, or was it yesterday, somebody said, well, we can't miss the fourth industrial revolution, right? But the fourth industrial revolution is about data. It's about mining data, accessing data, knowing how to use data to make business decisions and to find solutions. How many of our graduates are actually able to do data mining where they graduate? Today, not many, to be quite honest. How many of our companies that are existing today know how to use data and demand to have the capacity to do data mining? Very few. So if we want to leapfrog, somebody needs to introduce these concepts into our economy. We can incentivize the industry to do it. That's what we do at NILDA, is that we subsidize the industry to make sure that they raise their standards in terms of understanding technology and embracing it. But we're only going to succeed if the knowledge centers and the TVETs also push their students beyond what they used to learning to now focus on these new concepts that are all evolving around data, data management, data creation, and so on and so forth. So if we have students that are able to do, let's say, mechanical engineering, but they have no knowledge of mechatronics, we've already missed the fourth industrial revolution. So the leapfrogging bit is where I see we're lagging behind a little bit, both in the industry and in the knowledge centers. So government has a role to play there to try to push both sides to think a little bit more ambitiously and try to leapfrog to that extent.
Interesting. Modesto, do you think you guys have been doing it the wrong way and training our students the wrong way? You probably are giving them the things that we shouldn't be giving them?
Of course, entrepreneurship in Malawi started the time TVET was born. If you check in Africa, the term TVET internationally is TVET, but in Malawi and Zambia is TEVET. The first E, as is the case of Malawi, stands for entrepreneurship, which means that entrepreneurship is taken as a core subject in the delivery of TVET in Malawi. But entrepreneurship, according to our experience, as is the case of Malawi, ought not to be delivered only through institutional training. It needs to be taken beyond the classroom and also to the industry, so to say, by putting up structures that supports graduates from the TVET sector to venture into entrepreneurship. They should see entrepreneurship as a destination after finishing their training. So Malawi, in support of that, has developed a specific entrepreneurship development strategy to support the implementation of the TVET policy. Within the strategy, it has been identified that apart from just an instructor standing in front of the students, we need also to link entrepreneurs to these students to existing entrepreneurs. They act as role models, and we have paraded some of the graduates that have thought of going into entrepreneurship into institutions, so that through the interactions, they can inspire some of the students in institutions to look into establishing their own businesses as a destiny after finishing training. So we feel Africa can emulate the same. That entrepreneurship, in as far as TVET is concerned, should not be a classroom issue. It should go beyond the classroom. Thank you very much.
Do you have the role models you're talking about? And if not, why? Where have we gone wrong, and how can we correct ourselves?
Yeah, we have role models. These role models, actually, some of them have established their businesses, and we have systems of following them up. We conducted a study last year on what happens to our graduates after finishing school. So we identified that about 60% trained under non-formal programs were going straight into business. While formal programs, we had about 40% starting their own businesses. And going further, digging deep on sustainability of the businesses established by our graduates, we discovered that 81% had their businesses running for more than 1 year. So it gives us hope. And some of them were even recruiting their own fellow students up to the numbers of 10 to 20 in each establishment, which we feel has got a ripple effect. And if this is harnessed by Africa, then the issue of unemployment among the youth would be a foregone issue. Thank you.
One of the reasons I brought up the issue of role models, the question of role models rather, is there's an issue of mindset. Parents are thinking that, if the children can be lawyers or doctors, then they have become academic failures. On the other hand, students also don't want to go that way because they think the cool thing is the office thing. So how do we change that mindset, that stereotype? To you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thanks a lot. On the issue of the mindset, first of all, we need to carry out what we may call labor market surveys to inform the young ones and the youth that they cannot all be doctors, to inform the parents also. Not every child can be an engineer. So the most important thing is to provide the accurate data of the available trained areas and the gaps which do exist for the purpose of even training. Because it's either surprising that we enroll students, but even finding a place for them to be attached, leave alone the issue of even what we are calling internship program, just for the attachment, you find it's not there. Then why are you training this person, even if you cannot get a place to be attached? So let us be clear to the citizens, to all the Africans, that this is the reality. Welcome.
Interesting, please.
I think the way just to supplement what my colleague has said, which I think is very true, is also when you go to a TVET school, what do you see? Which is one issue we had in Rwanda when we started promoting TVET in the early 2000s. You would go to TVET schools and they look like, places of solace. There's barely any equipment, there's no lighting, the infrastructure is dilapidated. So telling parents that TVET is an equivalent to university in terms of opening or employment opportunities, and they visit these schools and they look horrible, is step one. So I think being able to have infrastructure that is inspiring, infrastructure with equipment, infrastructure with proper teachers that can engage the parents, allowing the parents or encouraging the parents to visit this TVET facility, for us was step one. And we had to look at ourselves and say, okay, would you put your own child in this environment, you know, and have an honest answer around that. So I think when we did TVET development, the first thing was providing state-of-the-art infrastructure, both in terms of the buildings and the dormitories. And then the second thing is the type of teachers that you meet when you go there. Are these people who are engaging, or are these people who are just themselves depressed? You know, so the kids, they cannot inspire your children. And then the third thing was, who goes to these schools? Because we need to be honest as policymakers. We cannot say that we are going to encourage young Rwandans to go to this school if our own children are being educated abroad, right? So you need to strike a balance. You also need to be honest with yourself. And we were inspired enough to have a couple of ministers, a couple of known policymakers actually putting their kids through TVET, right? And then sharing the statistics, the kind of statistics that my colleague from Malawi was sharing, saying actually in Rwanda today, if you have a degree in law, you have higher chances of being unemployed than if you have a TVET certificate, right? So the unemployment in law and social studies are probably 6 to 7 times higher than TVET graduates. Once parents started hearing these stories and started understanding that actually there are some areas in our economies that are saturated and others that are not, then the interest in TVET school was different. So I think it has to be a comprehensive approach, but a very honest one as well. Yeah.
I also want to believe that the market has not been so kind to TVET graduates. They tend to, at some point, still ask for, if you have a certificate in carpentry, for instance, or whatever it is, that has equivalence to any other degree, the tertiary institution thing, they prefer to go the other way. How do we change that to begin with?
So that's interesting because it depends which market you're talking about. I was talking to some software developers, and in Nilda, we're trying to start having hardware that are made in Rwanda, smart hardwares made in Rwanda. And I was talking to some of the people in the industry who are young entrepreneurs themselves and asking them, in your experience, who have been the best employees that you've managed to train yourself as an industry? And 90% of them quoted Tumba College of Technology, which is actually a TVET facility, as opposed to the University of Rwanda, where it says something about both, right? But what was interesting is that initially they thought that taking university graduate would be easier, and when it came to doing the job, they were actually very impressed with the spirit of creativity and problem solving that the students from Tumba actually had, which is a TVET school. So when you talk to the industry, it's actually not that clear-cut that they prefer university students. At the end of the day, they prefer whoever makes products that make money. So the ones that have the quickest learning curve are the ones that they will prefer. So very quickly within the industry, they started sharing information about themselves, saying, you know, if you want somebody who learns quickly, go look for these graduates from Tumba. So the information circulates very quickly within a sector. And I think as the TVET school quality keep improving, they are actually being appreciated by the industry, to be fair.
I'll come back to you from the issue of industrial attachment that he raised. Let me get your opinion on changing the mindset, the stereotype about the TVET graduates.
It all hinges on policy, so to say. Firstly, TVET in literature is argued to be lowly regarded, just because we have put on the table like white-collar jobs as highly lucrative compared to TVET. But however, in terms of survival in the world of employment, I think somebody from the TVET sector has a better chance to survive in the employment market than somebody with maybe a degree in social science and what have you. The reason is that a skill is a skill. You can use it whether in employment or outside doing your own activities. So the stereotype that has been there, it's basically based on the mindset that we have built amongst ourselves. You look from the policy formulation to actual implementation of the policies. The stereotype is there. We are the people here who can change that stereotype. In Malawi, we are rigorously working on the change of the mindset towards skills development. Let me say that from the higher office of the president, the skills development is at the heart of the president. He cannot address the people without mentioning the need for skills development. That one is helping quite a lot because we at the implementation level, we are now feeling the impact of the voice of the president. Because as of now, even the people that we previously thought would only apply for maybe university education, higher education, are now sending their application to TVET, just because there is that kind of need for mindset change. And the higher office is at the center of articulating the need for that change. It needs also to go down to our families, because every child is built within the framework of a family. If within our families we have also that stereotype, then that will be reflected at a global level or at a country level. It would be quite assuming to say that that stereotype is not here. Because if you ask ourselves, our children, where are we sending them? You would discover that we are sending our children to higher education, not in TVET, to TVET. And at the end of the day, we come here and talk about stereotyping. Let's change our mindsets. This is the sector that can build Africa. This is the sector that can build our economies. And as it was articulated earlier on by area speakers, I think this is the time that we needed to change and look at Africa as the hub for the world economy, starting from the TVET sector and also providing the services that the world would need in the near future. Thank you.
Fantastic. Very strong words from Mr. Modesto over there. This is the sector. Let's change our mindset. This is the sector that can transform our continent. And at this particular moment, before I give them more questions, let me open the floor to whoever would like to ask any questions. Please shoot your hand up. We have one here. Do you have microphones around? We have another one right behind. There is one in the middle. Two over here. Three. Fantastic. Let's keep the questions short and precise. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Geoffrey from Kenya. I am particularly interested on the area of embedding entrepreneurship to the skills and knowledge that we give to our trainees. Now, entrepreneurship, for me, is not just about training. I would think of creating an entrepreneurial culture. Creating an entrepreneurial culture in our trainees requires trainees to experience that working on your own, you can earn money. Now, how do we create the structures in our institutions to ensure we develop entrepreneurial culture and not training on entrepreneurship? That is my question.
The question of cultivating the courage of entrepreneurship, self-dependence, what we call a self-reliance, a kwijira in this country. Now, the second question, let me give this gentleman over here the opportunity. And then the lady right behind will be the third.
I'm Professor Katana from Kenya.
Nata?
Katana. Okay. My question is regarding the way, as Africa, we move towards transforming and creating the opportunities of our youth, and saying that we will prepare them for the fourth industrial revolution. My question to the panelists: how are we going to safeguard these youth from this common thing which is going to come across them, disruption? As they go to the labor market, they're bound to suffer from disruption. We know we have had a business like Nakumat. Nobody knew at one time Nakumat was going to be wiped out. So as we prepare the youth, they move from where we are appealing before, the IQ, that was the brain. We came to the level where we are saying about emotional intelligence as they live with others. But now they are suffering the danger in future as we are going towards AI, the artificial intelligence. How are we going to safeguard their jobs from disruption from those emerging technologies? Asante.
Thank you so much, Mr. Katana. There is a lady right behind.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm coming from Malawi. My name is Concepta. Chair, my question is going to all the presenters. There is a term that I have not been hearing since we started this conference, which I think when we talk about entrepreneurship and the skills utilization, that term needs to be part of design and realization. As a sector, what are we doing in the different countries to ensure that when we have given the students the skills, they also have the design component to ensure that they survive in the environment that they are in? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Two more. There is the two. Let's go this side. Yes,
Yeah, right.
that one.
Thank you very much. My name is Uzioma,
We're coming to you.
GTTI Gambia.
What's your name again, sir?
Uzioma, GTTI Gambia. I listen with a lot of interest to the panelists when you ask the question, how do we change the mindset of parents and young people so that they will embrace TVET? And the answer that I hear coming back over and over again is the preaching type response: let's change our mindset. Let's change our mindset. So I'm beginning to think that I've heard this many years now, and yet it hasn't worked. So I would begin to think that since it hasn't been working, these interventions have been going on, and yet youth unemployment is on the rise across the continent, that we should rethink what we should do. Let's change our mindset as a spoken expression will not solve the problem. And I would believe that this forum provides the best opportunity to articulate actionable behaviors that can, provide tangible results. So what I'm thinking, and again, there's a trend I've observed, since on Tuesday, on Monday actually. We seem to look at TVET with a limited scope. In other words, we look at TVET just from an African perspective. I think that we should begin to gradually shift from looking at TVET with an African lens alone and look at it with a global lens. Because when you produce these skills and train these young people, yes, they produce to serve their economies, but you've got to understand that directly or indirectly, they'll be in competition with people from the rest of the world. In other words, their products. They may need to export their products. And you've got to also understand that we in Africa particularly like consuming foreign goods. So the limitation that I see in the way we articulate the framework worries me. Now, let's change our mindset. We say that over and over again. We need something actionable, something measurable that can be done. What about putting money? What about getting budgets for perception studies? Carry out perception studies across the country identify those stereotypes that are there, identify the distribution of these stereotypes, maybe by region, by trade, by social class, and then begin to design interventions. Use such an empirical evidence would be better than just preaching. So I would believe that if we take such a measure, it will be better. Branding, phenomenal like branding is happening across the world. Marketization is going on. TVET is part of the global environment. So we really need to expand the scope and the lens with which you see the trade and begin to respond accordingly. So the issue of how do we change your mindset should be driven from an evidence-based perspective. Thank you.
Great comment there. Thank you so much. Let's receive, yes, the guy.
Okay,
right
I'm
at the
Jamal
back.
Abdul Majid from Nigeria.
Jamal. Yes.
My problem here is from the discussion I had, they said they have been training TVET students on software production and what have you. I don't know whether they have taken into consideration the comparative advantage of Africans. Can we really compete, as he's saying? So please, let's consider our comparative advantage. Did the organizers consider the comparative advantage of Africans? Thank you.
Considering the comparative advantage of the Africans. Let's respond to these ones very quickly. We have less than 20 minutes. Begin with Geoffrey, who's saying embedding entrepreneurship and skills, creating the culture or cultivating the culture of entrepreneurship. Who wants to go first?
Okay, Mike.
Please.
Okay, thanks a lot. Wanarukunja, you are aware, for example, in Kenya, we have established a conducive environment to attract companies to perform a good and an item known as a corporate social responsibility, where we have items on, we have even Chandari innovation through the Commercial Bank. We have the Kenya Youth Employment Program, whereby the trainees, TVET trainees are trained, they are supported to establish a business up to the incubation stage, and even more to that is done on the same. And that is quite encouraging. Then on the other one, on the question of Katana, I think for the job interruption, I think because of time, I may say, let us all advocate for internship. Let the internship programs not only be for the medical field, we need even to formalize the apprenticeship program to help these people so that they can understand what is required in various jobs. And then the other question on the mindset. That one was, sir, that was almost like a comment, but I do support it because you are all in the TVET sector. You have sent students for attachment. In Kenya, the elderly people, 70 years and above, are given a medical cover. I think you have heard about that, those who are Kenyans. And then here today, our moderator, you are discussing of the youth dividend. The youth who has that strength to work is not given a medical cover. But the older people, somebody who is almost dying, and I'm sorry to say so, is the one who is doing what? Covered. Then I'm saying this. Let's take care also of the youth. And as government, let us show we are ready to support the youth. When they are going for the industrial attachment, why can't the government also cover the medical covers for them? Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Mr.
Thank you very much. On creating an entrepreneurial culture, I think seriously, I think we need to work on that. There are some ways where that culture can be inculcated in our youth. One of them is the mentorship program, in which the youngs are attached to existing entrepreneurs so that they can learn and maybe adopt certain ways of doing things from the already developed entrepreneurs. But also the issue of incubation is very critical in inculcating the culture of entrepreneurship. But beyond that, we need also to have enabling factors. These enabling factors start from policy. We need to come up with policies that would encourage somebody to venture into skills and later on translate those skills into businesses. There's one jacket fits all kind of approach to policies. I think we needed to come up with deliberate policies that would encourage people that have got skills to use their skills in establishing the enterprises and businesses. That way, I believe will go a long way in bringing in the culture and interest of the graduates from the skills development initiatives to venture into businesses. How do we prepare Africa for the fourth industrial revolution? I think we needed to be a little bit careful. Yes, the fourth industrial revolution is coming, but you will see that some of the developed countries are already also crossing the same bridge, going back to the basics. Like in the case of Japan, I think they tried to digitalize every process, but now they are opting to go back to a human interface after seeing that there are some challenges in as far as supporting livelihood is concerned. So as Africa, we needed also to be careful as we face this industrial revolution, but we cannot sleep over it because it's something that is coming. What I may propose or think of considering is that how do we use the competitive advantage that we have? And our major area of competitive advantage is that we have the people. Mm-hmm. We need to use the people. That's where we have the best that we can offer to the world. On the issues of design and the realization, I think the issue of creativity and innovation comes into TVET. As we articulate or develop our curricula, I think let's challenge the youth, because innovation, creativity, design and realization are elements that will help our TVET to develop products that will be able to address the Africa problems. On how Africa should prepare itself in the world of competition, more especially on products, and our taste or our appetite for foreign products, I think that's where now TVET also finds its space. Can't we come up with the policies and also curricula that basically address the need for products that are manufactured outside there? What comes first to my mind is the poor quality of products that we make. I think if we adopt the quality-based kind of approaches to production, as well as to, which starts basically in training, I think we'll be able to make products that would easily substitute the products that we import. And that also requires some people to be skilled to make such kind of products. So I would say that for TVET to reach there, we need proper rebranding, but also make sure that we have supporting mechanisms for people that graduate from TVET and they think of going into business, be able to have enough capital to establish themselves to the level that they can make products that can easily replace what we import. So I think, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Modesto. Yes, you want to, there's a question regarding cultivating the entrepreneurial skills, rather the courage of entrepreneurship, is preparing our children for the fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just to add to what my colleagues have said, I think a small story. When we started doing entrepreneurship training, I would say, sprinkled it in the agenda or the curriculum of every education institution. And I remember talking to one of my nieces, asking her, so how was the entrepreneurship class? And she said, oh, it was boring. I said, why was it boring? She said, the first question I asked the teacher was, what was your worst experience in your company? And the teacher said, I've never owned a company. So it tells you already about sometimes the way we teach is also a problem, because if the person who's going to teach entrepreneurship classes has never worked or owned a company and is going to teach our kids how to create companies, it becomes very theoretical. So one of the things is the medium, I think, to create this culture is about who do we bring into the classroom to expose them to entrepreneurship. I think is very important. Getting people who are young entrepreneurs, who have failed, who have tried, is key. Number two, which is something that we don't talk about a lot, is the cost of failure in our economies or in our culture or in our communities. We always tell our young people, please be entrepreneurs. And the minute they fail at the first attempt, they become the black sheep of the family. So to what extent are we reducing the cost of failure? Are we allowing our kids, while they are going through TVET training, to have small businesses, to actually put themselves together in small groups, to think about a business idea and implement it while they're at school? Or are we seeing commercial activities in our school as an evil, destructive activity? Those are the kind of questions that we've been asking ourselves for university students and for TVET students, to say, to what extent are we walking the talk and actually allowing our young entrepreneurs to have business and commercial activities that are entrepreneurial in nature while they're at school, as opposed to asking them to sit, listen to what's happening at school, and basically when they graduate, start thinking about entrepreneurship. The second point that I wanted to make, which is linking the question around disruption on labor market and design realization. There was a study that was done by the World Bank. My institution is in charge of R&D, and they looked at, for every dollar spent on R&D, whether it has led to an increase in GDP growth. And the answer, surprisingly, was no. The only countries that managed to transform or to translate that additional dollar in R&D into economic growth were the countries that accompanied R&D with commercial advisory services. So basically building firm capabilities to be more resilient to change. Helping firms understand that change is inevitable, change will come. But to be ahead of the curve, there are some basic survival skills that your managerial team needs to have. And that was more important than what the firm was doing. So basically, if you're in the business of having a garage and you have the right firm capability, you can transform it into a hairdresser if you want, if you have the right skills and the right understanding of how business is done. So the importance of understanding that change will happen, but there are some core skills that you need to have to be able to transform your business as change comes to you, for you to make the decision whether you want to stay in this sector or move to another sector. And often this is where we fail, because most of our African companies pick a product, they stick to it, and they never develop it further. So when competition comes from India or China, it always comes as a shock, and they're not able to jump back on their feet and being able to move on to the next opportunity, economic opportunity. Interestingly, this is one area where Germany is one of the best because of TVET, because of the type of skills that they teach their students is such that they're able to change profession, as we think, very quickly, much quicker than university graduates. So I think if we link the two, we think about continuous product development, and we teach entrepreneurs to embrace change and how do you react to change as they're going through their TVET curriculum. That is something that could have a huge impact at the economic level. On the change of mindset, maybe I'll share with you our experience with Made in Rwanda. We started a Made in Rwanda campaign, which was basically focused at the beginning, now it has expanded, but it started with clothing, right? And how do we encourage, of course, we started a policy. My colleague talked about policy. It all starts with policy. The policy was about banning second-hand clothes and encouraging new clothes made in Rwanda. The first thing that we faced is that within ourselves, we did not consider Rwandan-made clothes as formal clothes. right? So the general stereotype was that if you're wearing a made in Rwanda dress as a woman or a shirt as a man, you look casual, or you look like you're not really coming to work. So being able to change that stereotype and saying, no, you can actually be very formal. And I think our president helped us by continuously wearing African patterns and African design in very formal setup. So to have the industrial policy, which was promoting made in Rwanda garments, with addressing the stereotype, which was, you can't be formal wearing African wear, and you do not need a tie and a jacket and a suit to be formal, along with now what we're trying to work on, which is how do we get our made in Rwanda, practitioners, the tailors, everybody to now understand how to improve quality and be more competitive, both in terms of quality and price. But my experience is that we need to do the three together. If we just do a campaign, it's just a campaign, it's just PR. People know if your product is crap, it's crap. You can advertise it as much as you want. In our communities, they'll recognize that it's crap, right? So we cannot just rebrand what we do. We also need to invest in quality. As we address the stereotype, as we rebrand, as we understand our stereotypes, and I agree with you 100%, but most of the work needs to go into quality. How do we make sure that what our TVET schools are giving us is quality? How do the final products that they produce is actually quality? And that will then feed the campaign and give it a sense of reality, if I can put it like this. Because at the end of the day, these TVET graduates have to produce products that are consumed by our market. Our market is also demanding, so if the products are not competitive and don't have quality, they'll keep consuming Chinese and Indian products.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. The next round of questions, before we conclude this, I will receive 3 questions. We have 1 here, 2 this side, and there's a gentleman over there. These are 3 questions. Please shoot your hand up. Let's begin with this.
Thank you so much, dear moderator. Mine is not a question as such. It's just a compliment to share the Rwandan experience. Anyway, as it has been said, yes, in 10 years, 15 years, we were lacking infrastructure, but the government came in and gave a budget to the tune of 60 million US dollars, 60 billion Rwandese francs, and most of the infrastructure have been built. Second, to change the attitude of parents thinking that the paper degrees are very important, we have started national TVET campaigns, and we want every year to have a national TVET week such that they can know the importance of TVET. Second, to bring in the notion of entrepreneurship skills, I wanted to share with the audience that we have innovation fund to support the innovators. Yes, you have got a product, you have innovated a product. How do you market it? How do you package it? How do you take it to the market? The innovation fund and the guarantee fund helps the innovators to take their products to the market. We have got incubation centers in many areas of our country. The purpose of the incubation center, once the TVET student has completed, has graduated, we know he does not have the money, the capital to start to rent a building and start his products. He comes in the TVET, the incubation center, he uses the facility, he uses the equipment. Let's take an example of baking. He would use the baking machines, he uses electricity and water, he uses everything for 6 months, good month, to generate some good income to go out and start to compete and stand alone and compete in the market. So those are the facilities we offer, and you are seeing TVET coming up. Of course, other TVET graduates coming up as participants in the Rwandan market and the society. But we do agree, a child of 10 years cannot run as the child of 20 years. TVET and entrepreneurship and competitiveness is a journey. It's a journey that has got to be built year in, year out, such that it grows up to the level that we expect. Secondly, I want to talk about, there's somebody who talked about the
we don't have much time, sir. You need to
I'm
probably
concluding.
Sure.
They talked about the comparative advantage. But if in Africa we want to come up, we had comparative advantages in 60s, 70s. They would say country X should grow coffee, and we could see a lot of coffee, and there came notions of the terminologies of dumping and what, because they would say, you grow coffee, you grow tea, you grow cotton, but when we take it to the market, we end up finding a lot, and we are given even not the production cost. So the countries, the Asian tigers and other countries that have grown to the expected levels, they have come up by competing. So we need more competitive advantage than comparative advantage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Long comment, but necessary. Kindly try to, keep your question very short.
Thank you very much.
Your name?
I'm called Geoffrey Tagambwe. I work for IPRC Judiciary as the Director of Planning. My first question is addressed to the Director from Malawi.
Do you mind asking one?
Okay, I had more than one, but I will abide by your request.
We have 2 minutes to conclude this. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Director from Malawi, can you cite some of the national infrastructures or activities that are done by your graduates from TVET? Am I clear on this?
Thank you. We got this.
Okay.
Can you cite one of the activities or projects that have been done by one of your graduates? Thanks.
Yeah.
The last one over here, there's a gentleman over there in the hat.
Sorry, moderator, it's a cap, not a hat.
Oh.
Good afternoon, all protocols observed. My name is Idris Bugaji, Kaduna Polytechnic, Nigeria. 2 quick ones. Number one, the first panelist, she mentioned about 4 major cornerstones to address unemployment, among them qualifications and skills. And that there is a gap between our paper qualifications and the hands-on skills. And as a result of that gap, the third panelist mentioned that industries are now setting up training centers within the industry. Now, the solution to this problem, I think, should be we should move towards apprenticeship training. The conventional diploma, higher national diploma certificate courses carried out in polytechnics and other TVET institutions, in classrooms and workshops and laboratories, we should now move away from that. The TVET mix, we must increase more of apprenticeship. Apprenticeship is the oldest mode of training globally. Even before Africa was colonized, that was the mode of training across the communities across Africa. And up to the beginning of the 20th century, that was the major means of training. So I'm imploring on all stakeholders to please to look into apprenticeship training. Yesterday, a panelist told us Rwanda has already introduced apprenticeship training in 3 areas with a mix of 50% industry and 50% in class. Last year, we were in the United Kingdom. My chairman was there and a few other members here. We saw how apprenticeship training is being reintroduced, even in developed countries like the United Kingdom. And in the United Kingdom, they are doing 80%, 20%. 80% in industry, 20% in classrooms. Every country should look at its own situation and also decide on the mix. But we need to give more attention to apprenticeship training. You need skills councils, sector skills councils, for you to move apprenticeship training. And that's what is missing in most African countries. In Nigeria, we have just a few sector skills councils, and you need industries to drive it. That's my first comment. The second comment quickly is I'm trying to do some benchmarking. If you look at the African continent, the Francophone countries are doing better than Anglophone countries in TVET. If you take West Africa, for example, the French-speaking countries in the building sector, for example, they are doing much better. Even in Nigeria, we employ Togolese, Chadians, and others in our cluster of Paris and other, tiling and so on. The TVET in Francophone is much better than Anglophone. But I'm happy that CAPA is opening up to the Anglophone. And I think we may need to rebrand CAPA to remove that Commonwealth. The British representatives were not even here at our conference anyway. Remove the Commonwealth and call it Pan-Africa Association of Polytechnics and Technical Universities. Up to. To confirm this point, earlier this year I visited a French-speaking country, French Arabic, Morocco. And I saw one of the best models of TVET in Morocco. In Morocco, they have about 353 institutions and are providing training. At the moment, the population of students is 535,000. And they take students from grade 9, not even grade 12, from grade 9. And at the moment, according to statistics, they have supplied 850,000 trainees, graduates rather, to European market. In other words, TVET graduates of Morocco, they cross the Mediterranean with dignity. Their services are needed, while sub-Saharan African youth are crossing the Mediterranean dejected, unwanted, and most of them are being killed in the Mediterranean Ocean, in the Mediterranean Sea. So we need to reposition our TVET, empower our youth. If they can't find employment in our countries, allow them to go with dignity to other parts of the world, because the whole world is becoming a global village. And therefore, I would like to encourage CAPA at its next conference, if possible. Let us move over to Morocco and see a very good model over there. And I hope this would be considered by the executive committee. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Brilliant input over there. Thank you. We have one question, and I will make our closing remarks. One question going to him, I guess. The projects that you have in Malawi. Very quickly, 1 minute.
Yeah, we have several examples of graduates from the TVET sector that have established their own businesses. Just not to take you very far away from where we are, there was a presentation that was made this morning by my colleague from Malawi on a project in Kasama. And we had a team of about 20 students who worked all through and through to put up structures for a college, through which we used an integrated kind of approach of build and train. Those students, all of them opted not to get employed anywhere. They teamed up, and now it's a construction company formed out of the experiences they went through in the process of building the college. So that is one of the good examples which I can easily cite here, because there was a full presentation that was made this morning. But we have a number, and a good number, as I indicated earlier on, about 60% of people that we train established their own businesses. And 81% of those that were captured in a study had their businesses running for more than 1 year, which shows to us that there's an element also of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Modesto. Now, our closing remarks, which actually is backed by the question. How do we leverage the numbers in terms of population to make sure that our young people, who are the majority part of the African population, drive the fourth industrial revolution that we're talking about? Can we start with you, Mr. Lawrence?
Oh, okay, thanks a lot. One thing let me say is that we need to rebrand TVET, and therefore this course or this will attract many of our youth. And let the governments and do understand the role the youth can take and to what extent. What I may say, there are a number of things or policies that are supposed to be developed or implemented. Like as mentioned earlier, work integrated learning. Let them be a policy, let it be implemented. Next, there is need to develop a framework for engaging the industry. It should not be fluid. Then the Africa itself, there is need to harmonize the qualifications. Let the level descriptors be developed such that as we formalize the apprenticeship program, the qualifications are within what is really accepted. To some extent also, there is need of a lot of financial support that is required. You are aware that many of our institutions may be lacking equipment. There can be a collaboration between the various private sectors and the industry so that now the equipment that do exist in the industry, there is a memorandum of understanding where the trainees can go there for the purpose of training as well as even in assessment. Our minister from Namibia mentioned something very important, whereby we need to certify our youth who have acquired training in other form. In other words, there is need to conduct recognition of prior learning assessment and we issue certificates to them so that they can be use to the various nations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Please, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. If we are to capitalize on the youth population that we have in Africa, I believe countries ought to come up with the proper mechanism of providing business startup capital to those that would want to venture into entrepreneurship, and also provide specialized equipment, tools, and training so that those establishments are able to produce quality products that are competitive on the market. But also let's embed in our programming the issues of mentorship, coaching, and incubation. But also let's not leave out our capacity to train people in entrepreneurship by training our teachers on issues of entrepreneurship, but also engage the industry or engage the entrepreneurs that are already practicing to provide experiential training to our students as we skill them. But also, finally, let's come up with proper policies and legal framework that promotes people with skills to start businesses. Thank you very much for your listening. I think it has been wonderful to share some of these insights with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Modeste. Your closing remarks. He talked about industrial attachment as well. He did to tackle that in your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I want to close by giving you statistics. The middle class in Africa is expected to triple in the next 15 years. Right? This middle class, which is a middle class of African, which mainly is an urban middle class, will have to consume products. Where are these products going to come from? Are we raising product developers? Are we creating a generation of innovators? Or is this growth of the African middle class just going to fuel imports from China, India, US, and other countries? So for me, the growth of this middle class is an unprecedented opportunity for the African graduates from TVET and from universities to actually become entrepreneurs and seek these opportunities to create new products. But the question is, what kind of products are our young entrepreneurs going to create? Are they going to create products of the first industrial revolution, mechanical, basic products, or will they be able to compete having smart, competitive products made from our own raw material? I think this is a challenge that we have, and we can talk about the rest, but at the end of the day, this is what it will boil down to if we want to address unemployment, as you rightly mentioned. Now, you talked about the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution is only going to make sense if we manage to tie it to a real economy, right? We had a discussion recently at the Ministry of Trade around how can we use fourth industrial revolution knowledge to link it to, for example, our livestock development program. To what extent are we using cow horns to do dashboards for cars? Because it can be a raw material for dashboard for cars. Or are we just throwing them away and doing very basic arts and craft with them? So to what extent will we be able to use some of these latest technologies in biotechnology, in artificial intelligence, to actually link it to the real economy of African countries and solving problems that are being faced by African consumers? I think this is where a lot of work needs to take place. We've done a lot, I agree with my colleague from TVET, but this is now the conversation that we need to have today. Now, finally, I really like the point made by your colleague from Nigeria, talking about apprenticeship. And what is clear now is unless we create incentives for the private sector to agree to take on these apprentice students as much as possible, I was going to say on a full-time basis, but probably 80% of the time, there's going to be a problem. So if we spend all our budgets focusing on TVET institutions and not looking at the needs of the private sector to be able to onboard these young apprentices, we'll have missed a big piece of the puzzle. So what is clear when we talk to the industry, for us who talk to them on a daily basis because of R&D, is that they are willing to take on the apprentice, but right now the cost of taking on, for many African countries, is still quite high. We're working on it in Rwanda, but it's something that we need to be much more aggressive on as African countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I managed to note down some of your recommendations, which the first one was to harmonize our codification as Africa, the need for financial support to support the quality of training, address industrial attachment gaps, which was also mentioned in terms of if we need to do that, we need to create apprenticeship programs and opportunities for our TVET graduates, the proper mechanism for providing startup capital, and then mentorship and incubation, and then like fourth industrial revolution will make sense if we attach it to our economies. I hope I got everything right. And that brings us to the end of this discussion, but before I invite the next moderator, I have two announcements to make. One is that all the ladies are meeting in D10 at 4 o'clock, so better be there. We are 15 minutes late. Announcement for those who are keeping the receivers, kindly leave them by the table on your way out. These receivers, don't walk with them out. Let's appreciate panelists. Thank you so much for your time, and that's been me and the rest of the team. Bye.